Good evening. You have no idea how long I've been waiting to say that. After 2 years of conference calls, of meetings, of emails, and after 25 years of anticipation, here we are with a summit on high school psychology education. So we haven't quite started yet. The official start is just about here. From now until the end of time, would like everyone to know what the first word was for this conference, the initial word for this conference. Are you ready? Here it is. Okay? We understand that the perception of psychology, especially for high school teachers, has not always been the best, that the class has not been rooted in science. We know that we've been working on that for years, and this summit will also take us to the next level, we believe, with regard to psychology as a science. There's a reason strand number 1 is on the science of psychology. So we're thrilled about that. So that's the first word. There was debate as to what the second word should be. The first word was really a no-brainer for us. Steering committee had no problem coming up with what that should be. The second word, though, was a little more tense for us. And so we collected, this is not a comprehensive list, mind you, but we did come up, some of the rejected ones that we had. I'd never heard of neuroimagining, actually until yesterday. So I appreciate that one, Rick. There are a few others on here. I don't know how many of you are pickleball players. We didn't know, one word or two, so we had to throw it out. We couldn't decide. There was debate. There was some nostalgia, for the 80s, longing for the 80s. So we rejected that too. And then things just fell apart. There were so many things here that are beyond explanation. And then the last one, this is coming from Nebraska. I think it's safe for me to say that last one there is an oxymoron these days. So it's tough. The truth hurts. So the official second word actually is gratitude. Truly gratitude. There are so many people to thank, so many organizations to thank. And so we're going to express some of that gratitude now. We're going to lean on the work of psychologist Dr. Bob Emmons. We know that there are good things, and we know that this goodness can come outside of who we are. It's bigger than we are. So as we start, there is no other place to start when it comes to gratitude except the APA. Simply put, APA has been dynamic in its support of this conference, and we can't thank APA enough. Don't know how many of you know the mission statement of APA, but we dropped that in there underneath the logo. And I think it's fair to say that what we're doing here feeds that mission statement, and it's important to feed the mission statement. Second, Weber State. Simply incredible, the support that we've had here. I mean, look at this space that we have, and the reception, and the way that this has worked out for us. We have an excerpt there from Weber State's mission statement. And I think it's fair to say that Weber State is serving as an educational and cultural leader when it comes to making sure that they support things along this line. So we have a mission statement too. And it's so important that it made the banner. I think it's beautiful in its simplicity in terms of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create the best future for high school psychology education. It used to say best possible, and then we thought Charles Brewer would be so upset if we worded it that way. So when it comes to the mission statement, and one of the reasons that we're highlighting this is because everything we do here this week should feed the mission statement. Everything that we work on in our strands, in some way or another, should support the mission statement. And I think there will be times when there'll be some struggles and there'll be some debate within your strand. That's a good time to go to the mission statement and to ask yourself, is this what's best? Is this what's best for high school psychology education? So that's a good one for us. 4 people that we need to thank individually. We're still on the gratitude. When this all got started, there was actually a meeting that we were having. Several of you have been to the workshop at Clark University, the best professional development we have going right now. Truly outstanding. And at one of those conferences, it was mentioned, there have been conferences on education that have included high school psychology teachers, but there's never been one solely to support high school psychology. And after that was over, or after that was said, Emily Chesnes. Yeah. Where is she? Emily, where are you? Okay, she's working. She's on she had a call she had to make. Emily, in her brilliance, started asking questions. What would this look like? How would we make this work? I believe she then took it to Amy Feinberg, who was on the BEA, and she was able to get this in front of BEA for a vote. The BEA, Board of Educational Affairs, decided that it would support a steering committee, and we were off and running at that point to try to get this to work. Of course, we can't mention Emily without mentioning Robin. If you've never worked with Robin, you've missed out. The way that she suggests the way to go, the things to consider to move things along has just really been dynamic for us, and we can't thank her enough. Third on this list, Eric Amsel over there. No one will ever know, and I don't think Eric will ever really want to talk about all of what it takes to put something like this on. He has been perpetual motion. You would not have had the rides that you had to get here. You would not have the bedding in the dorm. Let's move on. Yeah. Everything funnels back to Eric with regard to what we're doing here at Weber State, going back to the original proposal when we were deciding where were we going to hold this. We wanted a place that was beautiful. We wanted a place that would be supportive and helpful, and boy did we find it in Weber State. So thanks again, Eric. And then someone that is often under the radar, Kristen Whitlar. the things you were able to do, the way that you were able to get things done, and you're still getting these things done. We were asking for some support that has arrived. We have some coolers with some ice in it for the Cokes and everything else that we will be drinking. So anyway, these four people stand above everybody else. We also know that there was the steering committee. If we would have the steering committee now, please stand. If you would stand and be recognized. Okay. Please remain standing. Please remain standing. The steering, it's still standing. Steering committee has been dynamic and tireless in their efforts to get things going. And after about, I guess it was the first year, after the first year, maybe even sooner than that, we added the co-leaders to each one of the strands. If the co-leaders would now please stand. Co-leaders, please stand. Okay. This represents the leadership of our summit, and we can't thank you all enough. No summit, no meeting like this just comes out of thin air. We've had some dynamic donors as well, and if we could recognize those who really came through for us financially, take a look at that list. It's a great list of organizations and the foundations that are a part of that. This is an expensive endeavor. We didn't want anybody to have to pay for their way out here, for the food, for any of that. And we've been able to do that. Other groups as well at the next level, so many divisions in APA, and that's really heartening. So many divisions came through with some kind of support for us. And you see UTOPS down there as well. And then our donors at different levels. We have a couple of breaks that can be attributed to some companies. So a round of applause, please, for all of the donors. All right, so very briefly then, in terms of how we got here, we know the first of these was the St. Mary's Conference. I'm not going to say a lot about this because some others are going to be talking about this too. What I will say is that there were 2 high school teachers that were invited to St. Mary's. And I think there are several people actually, maybe, yes, in the audience who attended St. Mary's. Why don't you wave your hand if you were a St. Mary's person or stand or okay. The high school teachers were Karin Hale and Bates Mandel. They became the first co-chairs of what would become TOPS. And TOPS was formed shortly after St. Mary's, after great discussion. AP test was given that year too. We have a picture from St. Mary's. This is to show you how long ago it was. This looks like it predates Kodachrome. But you can see that good-looking group there. So anyway, St. Mary's, and then there were 3 other conferences, counting this one now. All of them had high school teacher involvement. P3, for those who don't know, that was high school, community college, and colleges and universities forming that particular group. Oops. It's all right. So anyway, what we're saying here now, when you look at the time that it's taken for us to get here, when you start to realize just how rare opportunities like this are and what it takes for us to do something like this, I want to say I'm hopeful that during this week, we will do everything we can to make the best of this situation, to take advantage of having these great minds together within each of these strands. And you look at them from strand 1 to 8, the folks that are in them, outstanding individuals. This is a time for us to make the best of it, but also to enjoy what we have here. It's going to go fast. These days, we're going to blink and it's going to be over. So I also encourage you to take time to savor, to be mindful of what's going on around you and the people that you're with, and to take some opportunity to meet some people who are some new faces. So thank you for that. The co-chair for this event is someone that I've known for a long time. She has been involved in APA governance for quite some time, has done a number of workshops, was a teacher for many years. She handed me what her job title is now. It has fallen on the floor. If I remember correctly, her current title is Advanced Programs Specialist for the Jefferson County Schools in Alabama. She has been a wonderful co-chair for us. There were times, and it's been very helpful, truly, when one of us was unable to perhaps get something done, the other one was right there to make sure that it happened. So would you please give a very warm welcome to the person who's going to talk to us about our goals and objectives and our outcomes, Dr. Amy Feinberg.
So, I'm tired of talking about this. I'm so excited that you're here and that you are here to do this, to create the best possible future for high school psychology. I have been involved in TOP since the beginning of my teaching career in 1995, last century. And these same issues keep coming up over and over, the issues that you have before you. And so I'm so excited to bring together all of your minds to think about these things and to help us think through the pluses and the minuses and the roadblocks and the challenges and everything that we need to do to chart the course between now and, you know, way past my retirement, hopefully. So as we were trying to formulate, so what are we going to do? We developed some goals, and our goals really are about strengthening what we have. The state of high school psychology as it is right now, it is pretty strong because of the tenacity of people like you. People who may or may not have had appropriate training to teach that course that your principal came and said, hey, guess what? You're going to teach this like next week. But you said, okay, and you took courses and you went to PD and you read books and you got online when it eventually became available in the late 90s. And you figured it out. And you came to APA and you went to NCSS and you bonded and you developed this network of colleagues that has brought us to this point where we have national standards and where we have, you know, resources out the yin yang. When people say, hey, does anybody have an activity on sensation and perception? We're able to say, oh, do we ever? When I started, Charlie had some stuff. And so here we are at this fabulous place where we can identify. We had 130 people apply for this conference. We wanted to take them all. And you know, so we can gather all of these people together and tackle these issues. But what we need to do now is continue that work of strengthening. We want to strengthen the value of psychological science. We want to make sure that what we teach in the high school course is reflective of the discipline of the researchers and the practitioners that are out there in the world doing psychology. We want to strengthen the assessment. We want to know that our students know what they're supposed to know and that they are then able to take that out and share it with the world. We want to strengthen the reach. We want everybody to know what we know. Everybody should take a psychology course. Everybody. So let's make that case. So how are we going to do that? We've decided to have 8 conferences this week. So these are our conferences that we're having. Each of you will be with your strand. If you're not familiar with what the other strands are doing, here they are. We are making the case for high school psychology as a science. We are articulating why taking psychology is important. We are strengthening and making the standards be like the other sciences. We are looking at assessment. We are looking at diversity. We are looking at technology. We are looking at professional learning. We are looking at certification and identifying who is a high school psychology teacher and helping people identify as a high school psychology teacher and not somebody who also teaches psychology. It's very different. On one level, this is incredibly overwhelming. On another level, it's incredibly exciting. And so, as Robin Hailstork said so eloquently today, your names are going to be etched in the history books. People will go, "Oh, you were at Weber State?" And we're like, "Yeah, it was crazy." And you'll be able to talk about what we did here and how we were able to help advance the conversation, not just, hopefully, for our teacher colleagues and friends, the students that they serve, but the world. The world needs us right now. The world needs to know about psychology. The world needs to be a better consumer of information that comes out of our discipline, and psychology is everywhere. And so how can we make sure that the message people get about psychology is the one we want them to have? We want to own the brand of psychology. So let's start that journey here. So as you talk about your outcomes and deliverables, we want you to think about some questions as you speak. Fortunately, I mean, the powerful thing about this conference is that you all have been talking about this for a little while. So hopefully tomorrow morning, you'll be able to hit the ground running. But here are some things that we want you to keep in mind as we go through this week. How is what you're doing different from anything else that's currently going on in the field? There's a lot of people out there who are doing work that can be applicable to the high school classroom. You just might not know about it. So what is that? And maybe what are some people doing in audiences that are not us? Who is your audience? Your audience may not be psychology teachers at all. Your audience may be boards of education. Your audience may be schools of education. Your audience may be your local community. Your audience may be your parent-teacher association. Your audience may be your state or federal government. We don't want to just preach to the choir. We want to preach to everybody. I'm from Alabama. We talk about preaching a lot, so. But who is your audience? And then how can we make sure they hear what we're saying? The public perception of psychology is not quite what we always want it to be. So how can we change that conversation? How can we make sure parents don't go, "Why are you going to major in psychology? What are you going to do with that?" We want them to be able to have an answer and hopefully eventually to stop that question altogether. How will we disseminate your deliverable? We don't want it to end up sitting on a shelf getting dusty. So what needs to happen afterward? Think big, think long term, think beyond you. You may not complete the work. It may be completed by others, but give them a roadmap for how to complete it. And then how will you measure that success? How are you going to know that what you've done mattered? No problem, right? Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. This is a dream come true for a lot of us. And I know I speak for Randy and for the committee, the co-leaders, the TOPS committee. Thank you for being here and for giving us your very best between now and Friday and beyond. Thank you. Now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker. Our next speaker is is probably our unsung hero in the APA right now. Well, actually, he's new. Wait, so, I'm backing up. I was introducing early. Our next speaker is actually not here. Our next speaker is actually, we actually have a taped message from the current CEO of the APA, Dr. Arthur Evans. Dr. Evans is new to the APA, so I'm sure when he got on the job and we said, oh, hey, and by the way, we're putting on this like little meeting in Utah, he was like, okay, sure. You know, one of those like many things that he's got to think about. But he definitely took his time out of his very busy schedule to record this message for us because he wants to know that the APA is completely behind this effort. Arthur Evans is the CEO. He assumed this post on March 20th of this year. And before joining the APA, he served 12 years as commissioner of Philadelphia's Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Service. He has a long career in public health and in mental health service. And so without further ado, we will now hear from Dr. Evans.
Hello, and welcome to the APA Summit for High School. Hello, and welcome to the APA Summit for High School Education. My name is Arthur Evans, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the American Psychological Association. APA is pleased to be sponsoring this summit with Weber State University and our many contributing sponsors. APA has supported the teaching of high school psychology for decades and has long recognized its importance as the beginning of the pipeline for our discipline. As APA celebrates our 125th anniversary this year, we are taking this opportunity to look back at where we have been and look forward to where we are going, both for APA and psychology as a discipline. What a great year to hold this summit to create the best possible future for high school education. Among my priorities for APA is increasing the brand and recognition of APA and psychology as a discipline and as a science. This is important because of the many contributions that our discipline and profession has made. We want all of our communities to know about that. The work in Utah will advance these priorities, and I thank you for your time and energy. On behalf of APA, best wishes for a very productive week. Thank you.
Well, that sounds about right. Sounds like we're right on track. As Dr. Evans mentioned, the APA is 125 years old today, or this year, and we learned yesterday that it was actually on July 8th, 125 years ago, 1892, that the APA was founded at Clark University. So more good timing. More good timing. All right, now the unsung hero of ours at APA. I'd like to introduce the executive director of the Education Directorate for the APA, Dr. Jim Diaz-Granados. Jim has been with APA since 2014. Prior to that, he was chair and professor of psychology, neuroscience, and biomedical studies in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at Baylor University. He is a UT Austin PhD holder. So any hook'em horns out there? Any? Bus? Okay. We needed to work on our Texas then. He was prior to Baylor, he was a postdoctoral fellow at the Medical University of South Carolina. His research focused on developmental, behavioral, and neurochemical aspects of alcohol abuse and addiction. So if you need a guest speaker, here he is. And he has been past president of the Council of Graduate Departments of Psychology and a member of the Commission on Accreditation, where he served as chair of the research work group and panel review co-chair. Jim, I've known Jim for a couple of years. He began his service while I was a member of the Board of Educational Affairs, which is the governing body for the Education Directorate for the association, a group of about, 20 people, is it 16, 20, anyway, it doesn't matter. BEA, yeah, 12, oh, 12, oh wow, just 12, felt like more. And immediately when he came on board at the directorate, he took up the cause of promoting the education of psychology in general, but specifically high school. And so I am thrilled that he is here. He will be with us most of the week. So if you are interested in kind of picking his brain about what we can do to help promote the vision of APA, the mission and vision of APA, and our work, give him a holler. So without any further ado, Jim Diaz-Granados.
I have no slides, but I do have about 25 minutes worth of remarks, so no, I'm kidding. It is really a pleasure and a delight to be here at Weber State with you all. When Amy says I'm tired of talking about this, I know exactly what she's talking about. I even think back at school, when you'd have a big exam coming or doctoral defense coming, and you just be thinking about it and working on it, and you're just like, all right, already, let's just get it done. Let's just do it. So very happy to be here. And I know thanks have been given, but I really have to give thanks to Weber State, in particular to Eric Amsel, and to the Office of Pre-College and Undergraduate Education, Robin Hale-Storks and Emily Chestness. They're just two of the magnificent staff that I get to lead at the APA. And by lead, I mean just get out of their way and let them do the wonderful things that they do. So thank you all very much. So welcome to the APA Summit for High School Psychology Education. As Dr. Evans mentioned, APA has been supporting the teaching of high school psychology for decades. We have a long history at APA of holding national conferences at every level of psychology education except one, and that changes today. For this is the first national conference on high school psychology at the APA. And we are just pleased beyond pleased to be able to co-sponsor this with Weber State and so many of our contributing supporters that you saw on the slide that Randy showed you. So I think there's a page in your program that lists them, so please make sure you take note of who those folks are. So the Education Directorate, our mission is very simple. I like simple statements, simple mission statements. And our mission is to support education in psychology and to support the application of psychological science in education. So education in psychology and psychology in education. It's really what I get up for every morning and what I go to bed every night thinking about, is how do we do that at all levels of education. High school psychology certainly plays a huge role in the implementation and the success of the mission of the Education Directorate. High school courses are often the first and sometimes the only formal presentation or introduction to the discipline of psychology. And this is, again, as Dr. Evans said, the very beginning of the pipeline. This is the most important point for our citizenry. And and psychology teachers play an enormous role in developing a psychologically literate citizenry and are an important public face of psychology to students, to parents, to schools, to communities. Considering how much psychology has to offer students and how many of society's problems are influenced by human behavior, high school psychology courses must be the best that they can be. So creating the best future for high school psychology has implications far beyond the classroom, and as Amy said, worldwide. So I absolutely believe that, and again, that's why I love being a psychologist. I love what I do, because this is impactful, and I can't thank you enough for being here, just an absolute great opportunity to be able to plan the best future for high school psychology education. As been mentioned, this year is APA's 125th anniversary, and it's also the 25th anniversary of the APA Committee of Teachers of Psychology in Secondary Schools, known as TOPS, and that's because they are TOPS at the APA. Again, as stated, it was 125 years ago yesterday, and so in the spirit of landmark events in psychology and at the APA, I am sure that the week ahead will have lasting effects for psychology education for years to come. So on behalf of the APA Education Directorate, thank you for being here, and thanks in advance for your hard work this week. Now, I am delighted to introduce our next speaker. We have with us today the 2017 President of the American Psychological Association, Dr. Antonio Puente. So you have in your documents, you have a short bio, and I'm not going to read this to you. So I'm just going to maybe share some other things that are not in that bio. I'm not going to embarrass you, Tony. So Tony is a professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, where are my Longhorns? Where he has been since 1981 and built a remarkable academic career teaching the biological basis of behavior, clinical neuropsychology, and the history of psychology, publishing 8 books, 79 book chapters, over 100 scholarly journal articles. He starts every board meeting with a history trivia question. This is how much Tony loves the history of psychology. He has taught close to 10,000 undergraduates, supervised 35 theses, and 9 postdoctoral fellows. His research focuses on the interface between culture and neuropsychology, and he has collaborators in Spain, Russia, and throughout Latin America. He also holds academic appointments as visiting professor at the Universidad de Granada in Spain and UCLA. His beginnings. What have I told you so far? He was good at running a campaign and getting elected president of APA. I told you that he's got a remarkable academic career at UNCW. So I'm going to tell you that his beginning was rather remarkable as well. Tony was born in La Habana, Cuba, and at the age of 8 years old, became an immigrant in the United States, in the state of Florida. He earned his undergraduate degree in Florida from the University of Florida and his master's degree and PhD from the University of Georgia. This is a remarkable success story, and something that to me has more meaning today than it did, say 164 days ago. So it doesn't end there. So Tony, outside of UNCW, he does a lot of things outside of the classroom, outside of the laboratory. One of the things that I've learned about Tony is that he's visionary. Founding and Tony go together a lot of times. Tony is the founding director of Centro Hispano at UNCW, which is a center aimed at increasing enrollment and improving outcomes for students from Hispanic backgrounds. I looked up the 10-year report of the center that was published in 2015, which shows that there was over a 50% increase in enrollments and a near doubling of degrees awarded to students that had come through the center. There are all sorts of accolades and awards that have been won by students, and this is because Tony saw a need. He saw a need, and he not only saw it, but he stepped up and acted. He's also the founder and co-director of mental health services at the Cape Fear Clinic, which is a bilingual health center that is dedicated to serving the poor and uninsured. And in his bio, you know that he's a founding editor of a couple of journals and a book series and so on. So the other thing I've told you now about Tony, that he's a visionary leader. Over the last 18 months, I've been fortunate to get to work with Tony and have come to know him as a man of intelligence, as a man of passion, as a man of thoughtful deliberation and integrity. And it is my honor to be able to present him to you and to be able to call him colleague and friend. So please help me welcome Dr. Antonio Puente.
I just told him that was the best introduction I ever had. I think my mom helped him write it. And since she's deceased, I'm curious how that occurred. By the way, a quick word for those of you who actually chuckled about the campaign. First of all, I should apologize for all of you that were on my mailing list. But and as one of my colleagues said, damn, I'm so glad that you won. I'm tired of getting your emails. But if you want to know the truth, and I've said this a couple of times, but not very often publicly, that campaign was actually fashioned after Barack Obama, who's my son ended up working with him in the economic transition team. So it really wasn't my idea. It was basically my son's idea that got all this happen. But anyway, thank you for that really wonderful and warm introduction, and really glad to be here. I have some formal remarks to share with you, but I do want to share with you also one other thing, and that is that as APA president, you do have to do some things, and sometimes you want to do other things. And this is one of those that I wanted to do. I'm really delighted to be here. It's a pleasure and it's an honor, and I'm so delighted that we're here essentially on the 125th anniversary of APA. So on behalf of our 120,000 members and the board of directors, I want to especially thank Eric and Weber State. I want to thank the APA staff, unbelievable folks, and especially Jamie. You don't really know how good it feels to be president and have people like Jamie and his staff run the show. And the steering committee, unbelievable job that you've done. So thank you, and I look forward to the finished product, which I think should come in about 10 years, right? This is not one of those you go home on Thursday and it's all over. You're basically putting the footings down for a large building. All right, so you wonder, like, do I have anything to do with high school psychology? And yes, it was on the Committee for Undergraduate Education, and with a couple of you, I think it was Barney, maybe you're the only one, that been to Puget Sound, to Puget Sound and St. Mary's. And let's see, who was at Puget Sound? Barney, Jane, you, and Drew. Yeah, a couple of you guys, yeah. Good to have all of you folks back. And of course, I was involved with a couple of really wonderful people, and you're going to help me fill this list. Will McKeechee, by the way, Will McKeechee got me lost running one day during one of the development of AP. I don't know what, I was a young guy. I was handsome, young, had hair, and I was following this guru, and he was like, yeah, just keep running, Tony, keep running. And it's about an hour and a half later, I said, I think we're lost. But the AP program was not lost. So there's Ludi and unfortunately Greg Kimball, who's left us. Who else? Who else was part of that group? No, I was going to get them to tell us. Yeah, those two. Can you just stand up? Yeah, just stand up, yes. Wonderful group to work with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some things that came out of a book that Charles Brewer and Janet Matthews and I actually put together, which was initially drafted on a napkin at an APA convention. So some good ideas sometimes start unusual ways. So first of all, let me just share with you that psychology was taught way before psychology existed. And here's a simple example of what it was all about. I just want to share with you that moral philosophy, what was as a required course to graduate from high school a couple of centuries ago. And this happens to be the most popular book that was used at that time. The first conference that we talked about high school psychology, actually the first formal time that APA went to the table to address it was in 1899. And you notice there something that you brought up as the first word. They agreed on only one thing, that psychology was a science. And here we are 125 years later, almost 125 years later, saying the exact same thing. Why is it that we have to say it again? Because that we've had some mission creep and it's sort of washed away. And again, we talked about it not long after that, in 1908, when there was actually a formal group that convened. And finally, in the first undergraduate conference that Will McKeechee put together in 1952, the Committee for the Teaching of Psychology in High Schools. So this is basically how APA came to address this issue. But here's a more specific one. In 1935, the creation of an actual committee. High school affiliates became part of APA in 62. The College Board approved the psychology program. Okay, let's real quickly. How many times did APA petition the College Board to get as part of that? Okay, let's do a quick auction. Do I hear 5? How many 5? 5, 10. Anybody 10? 10, 15, about 20. We almost went 20 times before they finally said yes. Persistence. The first AP exam, as we just heard, in 1992. And of course, TOPS in 1992. And in 1999, the national standards. And for those of us that were there, it was not an easy sailing, folks. It seemed like such a no-brainer. It wasn't. People really debated this insanely. And here we are. This is one of your slides, Jamie. 1 million people. 1 million people, of which a quarter of those deal with basically what we call the AP. 1 million people. This is the quiet, necessary pipeline. So when you were talking about developing this conference, there was no way on earth I wasn't going to be here. This is it. If you are not putting that pipeline in the way that you are, there is no future. If you put things in that pipeline the wrong way, when we find out in 1994 when we did a Committee for Undergraduate Education survey, we found out that the average person teaching psychology at that time was a high school coach. Well, maybe I should apply to be the football coach. Well, there's no way that should be. It's time that we finally get our act together. I cannot believe it took 125 years for this conference to occur. May this be the first of many. I applaud you. I congratulate you. I'm honored to be here. And we look forward to making sure that the foundation that you build for psychology at the very beginning of psychology is the strongest and most visionary one. So thank you and best of luck. Now, can I borrow you for just a few moments? Yeah, okay. All right. sometimes, when you're president, you get to do certain things that are like really, truly fun. I'm glad to be here. I'm really honored and delighted, but there's some things that are really fun, and here's one of them. All right, so if you don't mind, and I just got back from Spain late last week, so oh, I'm sorry, it's in Spanish. Okay, now let me translate. All right, so let's get a little serious here. On the opening of the American Psychological Association's first summit on high school psychology education, the first APA presidential citation ever awarded to an educator significantly involved in high school psychology is given today to Randy Ernst. Yeah, I'm going to make him stay up here as I read the rest of this, because he obviously did not know. In fact, I have to tell you, no one knew that this was going to occur. So, if there ever was an educator committed to the importance and excellence of the teaching of psychology at the high school, it is Randy Ernst. He received his doctorate in education from the University of Nebraska, despite the fact that they don't have a football team right now. Dr. Ernst taught high school and was responsible for psychology curriculum for 30 years in the Lincoln, Nebraska public school system. Subsequently, he became an assistant professor at Nebraska Wesleyan University, which holds the unusual distinction for having produced numerous APA presidents. I don't know if you knew this, about four of them. Dr. Ernst is a significant force in the teaching of psychology. Here are 4 examples. One, he's one of the founders of Teachers of Psychology in Secondary School, which is at the core of high school psychology, both for APA and outside of APA. 2, Dr. Ernst was also on the original test development committee of the Advanced Placement Psychology program almost 3 decades ago. It's hard to imagine that. 3rd, he co-authored a seminal article on high school psychology that, in my view, that published in American Psychologist, that became the blueprint and impetus for what later became APA's national standards for high school psychology curricula. And finally, he's the co-chair of the steering committee for this most important critical summit of high school psychology. As a pioneer and as a leader of modern-day teaching of psychology, APA and all of psychology is fortunate to have Randy Ernst envision, develop, and subsequently fill the pipeline of both consumers and students of psychology at the rate of over 1 million individuals each year. With his leadership and vision, the future of psychology will reflect what our founders envisioned of psychology 125 years ago. So one more time, congratulations, Randy.
Dr. Puente, you have accomplished something that few of us have ever accomplished, and that is render Randy Ernst speechless. That was very exciting. Thank you. That was wonderful, and I think it speaks to how we all feel about Randy and his contributions. Okay, dinner time. Now is dinner. Dinner is being served buffet style out in the atria where we were, and then how are we on time? Are we still looking at a 5:45? We blew. Yeah, I figured we blew that one. So what time is it now? It's 6:11. So do we want to 6:11? Okay, so 6:35, 40. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll judge it. We're teachers. We're flexible. This is how we roll. So, 6:45. 6:45. So we'll be an hour behind. So I hope that's okay because the bar is still open. That's all we got to know. So yes, and then we'll come back in here. We'll eat, and then Kristen will have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker for the evening, Charlie Blair Broker. So thank you, and welcome, and go eat. Eat, drink, and be merry.
Hi again, everybody. Please do feel free to finish up whatever it is you're eating at the moment. We did solve one mystery. The reason Emily was not here when we were applauding her is because the live feed was not working, and she was working. She was trying to get that to work. So if you had someone that was trying to watch that live feed, of course, we're sorry that didn't work this time. My understanding is that there is going to be a live feed on the TOPS webpage, TOPS Facebook page, live streaming on the TOPS Facebook page for our next speaker. I asked a teacher recently what it was that she liked best about teaching. And more specifically, what did she like best about teaching psychology? Here's what she said. How can you not like teaching psychology? I'm thankful every day to teach kids this great discipline. There is nothing better. It's so satisfying to watch as students discover psychological concepts in their everyday lives. It should come as no surprise that teacher was Kristen Whitlock. And Kristen, who I'm fortunate enough to consider a dear friend, is going to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Kristen, would you please come up now?
I am so pleased to be with you tonight and to have the chance to introduce our guest speaker and my amazing co-leader in Strand 1, Charlie Blair Broker. I first met Charlie at Texas A&M University in 1994 when he was an instructor and I a participant in the NSF-funded institute focused on the teaching of high school psychology. His knowledge, charisma, and passion for teaching opened my eyes to what teaching psychology could be. I came away from this experience in awe and on fire to develop my own skills and to improve the teaching of our discipline in my home state of Utah. Charlie is a beloved instructor and has helped hundreds of students of all ages find their love of psychology. He taught psychology at Cedar Falls High School from 1978 until his retirement in 2014 and is now an adjunct at Hawkeye Community College in Waterloo, Iowa. He has a great understanding of the teaching of high school psychology from the ground up and an appreciation of what it takes to continue a path of progress. In our joint efforts on Strand 1, I have glimpsed the remarkable vision he has for our future. Charlie is a founding father in the teaching of high school psychology. He has been involved in the reading of the Advanced Placement Psychology examination since the test was first administered in 1992 and completed a 3-year term on the AP Psychology Test Development Committee. He has been involved in several APA initiatives, serving as a member of the task force that authored the national standards for high school psychology, as a chair of TOPS, and as co-editor of the 4th volume of the APA Activities Handbook for the Teaching of Psychology. Charlie has led dozens of teacher workshops across the United States and Canada, sharing his vast experience and developing the talents of the next generation of psychology teachers. Charlie is a gifted writer and talented communicator. He can convey difficult concepts to a wide and varied audience with warmth and humor. Charlie's voice, his expertise, and his talents shine on the pages of his co-authored textbook, Thinking About Psychology, the Science of Mind and Behavior. And finally, Charlie is just a fascinating person, a role model, and best of all, a cherished friend. Please help me in welcoming Charlie Blair Broker.
I think mostly what you just said is I'm old. I'd forgotten half of that stuff. That's good. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Wow. Isn't this exciting? This is just great. No, we're tired of clapping. We don't need to do that yet. A couple things. The PowerPoint will be posted on the Summit webpage, according to Emily, and we have apparently broken the internet in terms of streaming, so I'm not sure we'll have digital guests, but if you're out there and you'd like to send in a comment or a question, you can use the hashtag PsychSummit on Twitter, and we'll try to have time to respond to that at the end. So we'll just see what happens. This wouldn't be a real presentation without a reversible figure, so I found one. Got tricks, you got to take advantage of them, right? But I particularly like this one, and I think it helps us kind of orient tonight, looking backwards a little bit at where we came from and forwards at where we may be going. Not that I know, not that any of us know, but that's why we're here, right? I think it also can be used to look at a dichotomy that's existed way back to when Tony was talking about in the early years, and that is whether our course, high school psychology, should be more about personal adjustment or more about science. And we know now, we should know, that they're not mutually incompatible. But I think often they've been viewed that way, and that the personal adjustment side of it has been far less scientifically oriented. And we need to change that. And that's a lot of what Strand 2 is about, with the skills and abilities that they're gonna learn about and teach us about through the course of this week. Much of the first part of this talk came from 3 papers, the second of which, Ernst and Petrosian, is the one that Tony talked about in terms of one of Randy's contributions. I think the first high school teacher ever to be included as an author in American Psychologist. I'm not exactly sure about that. But a lot came from that and from the others as well. So if you're interested in pursuing some of these ideas farther, you can find more information there. And as Tony said, this goes back a long time, longer than APA. We're talking almost 200 years, 180 years to these courses on mental philosophy. The mental philosophy course did deal with things like intellect and sensibilities and will, and try to develop them. And they started these courses along with moral philosophy courses in colleges. And often they were taught by the president of the colleges, and they were taught to seniors as sort of a capstone experience. And then it was thought that this should be part of the high school curriculum as well. So a lot of textbooks were written specifically for the high school student to learn the mental and moral philosophy that they would need to succeed. Beginning in the 1870s, there was a switch, and there was less emphasis on more of this philosophical side and a little bit more emphasis on laboratory psychology. And we know why, of course. It's because of the birth of the new psychology, Wundt psychology, where people were taken into the laboratory, and it wasn't enough to just sit and ponder things and look at the world, but we had to conduct tests and we had to gather data. And that shift was also portrayed in the early years. Starting with the 20th century, there were a whole host of social situations, including the growth of the cities and immigration coming in. And it was thought that people needed help. And this is where some of the adjustment came from. What can we do to help people begin to cope with some of these new challenges that modern society was throwing at our citizens? And when that happened, we began to look at mental hygiene classes. And there were about 10% of American high schools back at this time did teach courses in mental hygiene. And this was a really interesting movement. If you have some time, you can go back and look at mental hygiene. And you get the sense that these people had good hearts. They wanted to help people be able to fit in and know how to adjust and get along with other people. But you do have to question the scientific underpinnings of some of the things that happened here. They would cover things like self-understanding, development, personality, adjustment, things that we still cover today. But I sometimes wonder what kind of job they did with that. I'm not going to read you this quote, but critical thinking was a part of it too. This comes from the Benjamin History that was published about, I think 1999, 2000. And this was a high school teacher. And I did bold the last part of it. Would seem that democracy would recognize the value of psychological knowledge in the layman to enable him to keep a thinking head on his shoulders. I like that. And you get the sense that Jay was talking about critical thinking and how you evaluate information and how you sift through media and how you tell truth from fiction, which is still something that's important for us today, perhaps more important than it's ever been before. And then there's APA. What about APA? Where did they begin to start with this? And Tony, you took us back a little bit farther than I was aware of. But one of the things, and if you know me, you know how easy it is for me to do this. I started by Googling APA. And when I think of APA, I think of the American Psychological Association. I don't think, for example, of the American Psychiatric Association, which comes up, nor do I think of the American Planning Association, which is there to help community planners. I've never heard of the American Photographic Artists Group or the American Philosophical Association. The American Pool Players Association, by the way, has approximately twice the membership of the American Psychological Association. There is the Ansonia Parents Association, and you can read their minutes of their meetings online. Ansonia is in Ohio, I believe. The Apache Corporation is listed on the New York Stock Exchange as APA. This is an energy corporation from Texas. There's the Allied Pilots Association, the American Payroll Association, the American Pyrotechnics Association. They're coming off their busiest time of year. There's the American Polygraph Association, the Adirondack Park Agency. There is the American Precision's Arm Company. This is an arms dealer, basically. They have a very, very interesting inventory. Let's talk about it that way. The American Protective Association. This was an organization founded in Clinton, Iowa in 1938, which was largely devoted to opposing immigration of Catholic Irish people primarily. This was a Christian exclusionary organization. Interesting history. The Anderson Preparatory Academy is a military-style academy in Indiana. They offer 13 AP classes. I couldn't tell if one of those was psychology. There's the Alternative Practice Arrangement. This is a group in Canada that trains midwives. And apparently the alternative arrangement is a training option that they can take to learn how to practice midwifery. There's American Pale Ale. I was happy to see that one come up. And this was the one that truly shocked me. There's the Engineered Wood Association. And they are the APA. And they are the APA because they started out as the American Plywood Association and later expanded. And not only are the titles interesting, their logos are fascinating as well. Of course, the lower right, it's not a logo, but I couldn't help putting the American Pale Ale in there. And the brownish one on the center on the left, that's not a logo either. That's the stamp that the American Plywood Association puts on each piece of plywood that they sell. So that we know that it's coming from the group that endorses good product. But we're not talking about those APAs. We're talking about this APA, the APA that was born 125 years ago yesterday. Really quite remarkable. And what role have they had in high school psychology? And the more you dig into this, and I haven't dug into it enough, the more you find. I mean, they've been interested in high school psychology for a long time. I think primarily to protect what the APA has always known psychology to be, and to try to keep tabs on who's teaching these classes that are presenting themselves as psychology classes. What are in these books? What are the students getting from these classes? So in 1935, there was a committee to study problems connected with the teaching of psychology in high schools, and they existed for a couple of years, and I'll tell you something about their conclusions a little bit later. Starting in the 1950s, it's been pretty much continuous. The Committee on the Teaching of Psych in High Schools, which later became the Committee on Communication with High School Teachers, which then by 1962 became the Committee on Psychology in Secondary Schools. So it's been ongoing. And it's clear, just looking at the list of committees, that APA has recognized that there's something there. there's something that's important. And it is important because by the early 1960s, psychology was offered in a lot of schools. And I don't know about you, but you talk to people and say, I didn't have psych in my school. I didn't have psych in my school. But the data doesn't support that. So of larger high schools, schools with at least 100 people, 20% of them, okay, offered a course in psychology, which may not have been called psychology, which is why I think a lot of people don't recognize it for what it was. Going back to the 1954 committee, they reported that high school psych was taught under many labels, usually taught in the social studies departments. Teachers were not trained in psychology. Think of how well their findings match with the issues that we're still dealing with this week, and how much has not been accomplished that needs to be accomplished to have this work well. They use popular magazine articles rather than journal articles to teach their content, and they did express purposes, self-understanding, solving personal problems, social problems, getting along with others. I view that as that adjustment side of psychology, and then also represented to teach elementary principles of psychology, which I read as the scientific side of psychology. So the dichotomy is still there, still there. Ludi Benjamin says this in the 1950s and 60s, about the 1950s and 60s. Although the committees typically met twice each year, they had virtually no impact on the nature of high school psychology, nor did they provide much to that community in the way of resources for teaching or learning. So they were monitoring it, they weren't doing much. Okay? The problems were still there, the problems were festering, not a lot was being accomplished. That changed in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, the Clearinghouse for Pre-College Psychology was established, and finally, APA began to distribute information, not just collect information, but to actually get the word out and to help teachers do our jobs better, things that hadn't happened before. They began to flow. One thing that started at this time was the Psychology Teacher Network. It was called Periodically back then. But in the early 1970s, when it was founded and sent out 9 times a year free of charge, the mailing list was almost 6,000 teachers. So real, solid, good information. This was my first contact with APA. Okay, hearing about this mailing that was free and available, which helped a lot. Because that's the other thing that happened in the 1970s. I started. Okay, that was my first decade in the classroom, teaching in my first or second year of teaching. Can you tell what the lesson was? Schedules of reinforcement. And I remember I was using Fruit Loops or Cheerios or something to teach this young man whose name I can't remember to staple, and then trying to change the schedule and extinguish, trying to teach scientific psychology back in the 1970s. National Science Foundation was involved in the 1970s. We often associate the NSF workshops with the 1990s, but they funded workshops for high school psychology teachers in the 1970s. And psychologists did apply for these workshops, and they did receive grants. Okay, and these lasted up until the Reagan administration. And it was Reagan that cut off funding for science education, not just to psychology, but to the other sciences as well. And we haven't recovered, I don't think, really from that gap as well as we should have. One of these workshops was in Iowa, okay, at Wartburg College, taught under a person named Fred Ribich, who I'm still in touch with. I went to this workshop, and I got a 6-inch binder. That's a big honkin' binder. A 6-inch binder stuffed with the kinds of things that I could then use in class to help gear me up for teaching the psychology class the way I wanted to be able to teach that psychology class. And it's a shame that these workshops no longer exist. The College Board, as we've heard, got involved as well. 20 years of effort, 20 years of applications to finally be approved as an AP subject. The approval came in 1988. And then it took several years to actually establish the first test, do research about what should be in the test, canvass intro professors at colleges to find out what they were teaching so that our course could actually match it. Their reasoning for not approving the course before that was because they didn't feel that the high school course was scientific enough. And of course they were right. But it sort of led to a catch-22 where high school teachers really had no motivation to make their courses more scientific. That didn't happen until the AP program came into place. And once the AP program finally came into place, I think you really found a trickle-down effect. Now, we've heard about trickle-down in terms of economics. And I don't think there's much support for it. But you cannot deny that the non-AP and non-IB high school courses are stronger today because of the AP program. Because the people who teach the AP Psych classes typically teach the non-AP as well. And what they learned in the AP institutes and what they picked up at the reading, they brought back to all of their psychology classes, and they also told their colleagues. So there's been a wonderful spreading effect to increase the scientific nature of psychology as a result of that approval. And the growth, of course, has been amazing, which we'll look at in just a minute. The 90s, to me, it's unimaginable how many things were happening in the 1990s that had an impact on our field. First, there was the month-long NSF Institutes. This one is at Texas A&M. I don't know exactly which year. It may have been the second year. Some of the faces up there are going to look familiar to you, although a lot younger than they are right now. Upper right-hand corner is Ludi Benjamin, who I owe the world to. There are many people I owe a lot to, but it was Ben that opened many, many doors for me and made it possible to do the things that I've been able to do. These workshops provided intense instruction in content and methods. They also were a breeding ground for leadership. How many of you attended a 1990s month-long institute? And look at the number of people that are still here, okay, still here as a result of that. And they were happening all over. How many of you helped lead those institutes? Where's Barney? In Ithaca, and we had them in the Carolinas, and we had them in Illinois, and we had them in Kentucky, we had them in Texas, and so forth. They were just a wonderful, intense experience. Not every teacher could do it. To give up a month of your summer from your family to go off to these highly intense workshops was a lot to ask of people, but they had a profound impact on the people who were able to attend them. The AP exam administered for the first time in May of 1992. Here is the first group of readers. There are 19 people in the photograph. 17 of us were readers. The other 2 were ETS people that were assigned to help us with that. Alan, you are in that picture. Alan's right there. That is Alan. He did make it. The woman in front is Kathy Malley White, who was the first chief reader for AP Psychology. She was the chief reader for 2 years before health reasons made it difficult for her to continue, at which point Sam Cameron, second from the right, took over as chief reader. It's changed since then. 3,996 students took the exam that first year. By the end of the decade, we were up to 28,000 students. It seemed like so many, so many. How many of you were at this year's reading? Over 300,000 students took the exam. And they each write 2 essays. And one of them was question 1. And it's just astonishing to see what this has grown into. Our most recent chief reader is Rick Seefeld over here on the right, carrying on a long tradition of excellence in this regard. TOPS was established in 1992, and Tony already told us a little bit about that. For the first time, elected high school officials, teachers, were given the capacity to make decisions about what they needed, what the resources should go to, what the problems were. There had been high school teachers kind of representing before, but they had very little decision-making power until the TOPS board was established in 1992, and they gave us money. It wasn't just the dues money. I mean, we paid our dues, but they kicked in and continue to supplement TOPS because they recognize the importance. We've heard about the pipeline issues. We've heard about the 1 million students a year and how vital it is to make sure that we take that opportunity and do it right, because we may not have another opportunity. And too often damage has been done, much less good. There's more from the 1990s. There were the standards. How many of you have worked on some version of the high school standards? And how important that was to protect elective courses that were being dropped from schools back in the 1990s if they didn't have standards. So we had to get this done, and we did. Discovering psychology had an astonishing effect. Yes, discovering psychology, which made Phil Zimbardo a household word. But name? A household name. But to think that now you could buy this series for a couple $100 that actually had a psychologist talking about scientific psychology, research-based psychology, that people could watch these episodes on PBS, that you could sign up through your local community college and take a telecourse and take exams and get credit for this. High quality media available that had never been available before. It was an astonishing thing. Okay, it happened in the 1990s with help from people like Phil Zimbardo, who recognized the importance of getting the word out, okay, making sure that the public understood. And APA workshops. One of the things that the early top groups decided to do was to host workshops. And these started with the APA Traveling Psychology exhibit, which was put together for APA Centennial. Hardly seems like 25 years ago, but it was. And this exhibit started to travel around the country after it was displayed at the APA Centennial Convention in 1992 in Washington, D.C. And as it went to Dallas and to Minneapolis and to the Exploratorium, TOPS would send people to do workshops for local high school teachers. And then once the exhibit stopped traveling, we said, well, let's keep doing these workshops. So we went to New Orleans, we went to other places to give these workshops, and now it's evolved into Clark. And how many of you have been to Clark? Okay, again, look at the number of people who've been impacted by that. Clark just finished up last week, and I found this on the internet. Okay, and one of the things that they've done apparently this year was to solicit words of greeting to the 30 teachers at Clark University from famous psychologists, including Bandura. Okay, who talks about the importance of high school psychology and his interactions in high school psychology. And for a psychology teacher who's only ever read about Bandura, this can make a big difference. Okay, and it has this impact. And then to be able to go back and be able to tell your students, your classes, that you've had this interaction, okay, that you've had this connection can make all the difference and start the ball rolling to making your class a much more exciting place than it was otherwise. So, what do we have to say about the class? What can we do about this? And I sent out a couple requests on the AP Psychology Teachers Facebook page. I chose that one because it has the largest readership, asking one time if those teachers would be willing to have their students write me a little message about why psychology was important. And then a while later, I followed that up by asking teachers why it's important to teach psychology. That's where Kristen's quote came from that Randy read. I took all the responses and I typed them into a document and I poured them into a Wordle document. So the first one you're going to see is the students, what the students think. And this is a small sample, it's non-random, I don't think we can take too much from this, but here's what, I'm sorry, these are the teachers. We're starting with the teachers. A couple things stand out. First of all, students are important to teachers. Psychology gets short shrift a little bit because some people capitalize the word, that's the vertical one, and some people don't. Other things you'll find that there are skills involved, that we want to teach skills to our students. I think that's important. To me, these are the skills that allow us to evaluate information, to be literate about what happens. We want our students to think. I'd like to think it's thinking critically. I was disappointed that the word science and scientific didn't show up more often, but I think a lot of our teachers are talking about science even if they aren't using the word. Okay? It's a part of what they say. And here's some of the comments. This is just a sample of the sample. It relates to everything. Our course is ubiquitous. We can connect it to every article in the newspaper. How neat is that? I don't even know who this person is, about becoming the best human beings that we can be. Right, so there's that adjustment theme coming back. It's still there. It's still important for people. Annette, who's in this room, the content and methods teach my students life skills that can be applied to many areas of their lives. But this is an all-encompassing class. This touches everything. Maria, who's in this room, I love it when students walk out learning that there are systematic ways to study the mind. It's not just common sense. We can study it, and the results often are counterintuitive, unlike common sense would have us believe so often. Carl, who's not here, holding a moving target still, okay, long enough to figure out what's going on. Virginia, who's in this room, I love the end of this. They become much more purposeful in directing their own mental lives with an owner's manual for the mind and hand. They become pilots instead of passengers. Okay, how well said is that, and how important is that? And then there's another one. This isn't from a high school teacher, and he's not Bandura, and he's not Zimbardo, but Neil deGrasse Tyson weighed in on this issue, I think, on Twitter. I wished he'd said psychology instead of sociology, but it's the same thing. And I think it speaks to what science is and why just because something is difficult, like studying what we study, cognitive processes, studying behavior, doesn't mean it's non-scientific. To me, it makes it more interesting, more intriguing. Okay? There are interactions that we have to deal with that perhaps the chemist doesn't have to deal with, studying sulfur in the test tube. But that makes it better, and that makes it harder. And that should enhance our reputation rather than diminish our reputation. We've got to get the word out on that. That the techniques, statistical, methodological, that we have to develop to do our work are beyond what many sciences have to develop because of the complexity of our subject matter. It's important. How about the students? Again, a small non-random sample. Here is their Wordle. Here's what they came up with. Psychology is important. AP, a lot of these were AP. It came from the AP list. One thing I found was that virtually every student mentioned his or her psychology teacher. We are really important to them, and they aren't big because I didn't get that many responses from any one teacher. But we play a huge impact on their lives. They see it as psychology channeled through us. And many students say, if it wasn't for my teacher, not if it wasn't for psychology, but for my psychology teacher, it wouldn't have had the impact. And they don't recognize so many of us are good. Okay? It doesn't have to be your teacher or 1,000 others who are doing the same job. They're interested in college and career. This came up over and over and over. They want preparation for the future. They're interested in adjustment. They want to be able to get along with other people. And they mention science. Okay? But we need to sell this a little bit better, right? Okay? Something's wrong here. They're not getting the word. Okay? Not enough people are talking about this. Here are some comments. Quite literally changed my life since it became my career. So many of them pick careers that can be related to psychology. I love this one. How about that? Okay, the school she graduated with, she now goes back and she is the psychology teacher at that school. This one's a little bit long. This is one of Brad's students. Impossible to understand voting patterns or the effect of media on politics, for example, without being aware of cognitive biases. Okay, shouldn't everyone be aware of cognitive biases? Okay, and if we're touching 1 million lives per year, how come more don't? We have to do what we do more effectively, which is why we're here this week. I can't wait to get home and read my textbook. A lot of the kids that took my AP Psych class also took AP Calc. Okay, when I was at Cedar Falls High School, I can't ever remember an AP Calc student saying that. Okay, there is a passionate interest in our class that so many other courses don't have. How can you not be interested in psychology? And it comes through in many students' remarks. Another career feeds my passion for helping people, applying the knowledge I have and continue to acquire. It all started with AP Psychology. Here's a student of mine who wrote, she's a biologist, but talks about how her appreciation for behavior and people extend back to the psychology course that she took. I wish this too. This has already come up. Amy mentioned this. Okay? Why shouldn't every student have this opportunity, this important opportunity to be better prepared for life in our world? And we reached one student. At least one of them's out there. One of them is out there. That's a good thing. So I'm not a real fan of this comic strip, Pearls Before Swine, but I was just looking through the paper a couple weeks ago. I think it was a week ago today, maybe 2 weeks ago, and this came up. Pig is our student. Okay, he's our student, and we are the goat. Okay, we're trying to get things across, and I am going to read this to you. Do you know that most people are scientifically proven to be idiots? And we say, we're GOAT, the teacher, where did you learn that? It's here on this message board. That's somebody's opinion. Yeah, but it cites this blog. But is the author a scientist? No, but he references this online magazine. And are they some kind of experts? Can't you just hear yourself in class with these questions? No, but they link to Wikipedia. But anyone can enter stuff on Wikipedia. Yeah, but who's going to go to Wikipedia and falsely claim that people are scientifically proven to be idiots? And here we meet another character in the strip, Rat, who's very rat-like, and he's obviously the one who does it. Now, here's the pivot. Okay, here's the pivot. Here's where you'd like Pig to say, okay, this is why I have to be careful. But no, Pig wants to go hide his head in a hole. Okay, he's going to disconnect because it's too hard to think about these things. Well, it's not. We just have to give them the skills. We have to teach them how to do that. So here we are, and here are 8 parallel conferences that we're running this week. And I was tempted to talk about all of them, but I'm not going to. I want to say just a little bit about professional development because I hated literally every professional development opportunity that my school district hosted. Not hosted by psychology, but in the years I was there, never was a psychological scientist invited in to talk about learning or teaching. Not once. Here's the kind of stuff that I got from 37 years. This was a lecture about critical thinking and about how lectures cannot be used to promote critical thinking. So I was told that I couldn't be thinking critically because I'm just sitting here listening to the lecture. All I asked was why not, and I got in trouble for that. But that's the kind of stuff we got. This was when No Child Left Behind came along, and we had an orientation one day at the beginning of the school year. This is what's coming down the pike. This is what we're going to have to do. And in the first 10 minutes, we heard this. Students would all be required to meet minimum scores. No student left behind. No child left behind. So we all nodded our head, and then another administrator got up and told us that the same half hour between coffee breaks told us that the school would be required to identify underperforming teachers every year. So at the same time, every student had to pass muster. Some teachers couldn't. We couldn't all be adequate teachers. We were forced to identify substandard teachers, and yet we couldn't have substandard students. Yeah, right? That doesn't make much sense, does it? One thing did stick. This was one of the very first professional development meetings I ever went to. I don't remember the guy who said it, but it stuck with me all these years. It's good advice. I don't know why, but I've remembered it. I try to pick my battles now to a much greater degree than I ever used to before. So there's that. The other one that's changed so much in my teaching career is technology and online learning. And it happens incrementally, so you're not always aware of it. But if you contrast when I started with when I finished, the changes really become apparent. And this leads into the information. Amy, you mentioned this too, that there was no internet back then. And when I started, the problem for psych teachers was lack of resources. It just wasn't there. There were no resources. And the problem today is too many resources. Okay? Even the good ones. I mean, if you could find a way to exclude the bad ones, and we're working on that, but even if you're limited to good ones, you can't use them all. You have to do triage and find what fits the best. But it's so different than what it was. So we had movie projectors, okay, and they looked somewhat like this. And we had an AV club where kids could learn how to run the projector so you could sit there and drink coffee when it was on. And one thing I want you to notice is how attentive those kids were. Because we put on a video today, and that's an excuse for a lot of kids to go to sleep. So we get shorter and shorter video clips, hoping they'll stay awake that long. Okay? But they were so special back in the day that everybody paid attention. I don't think this was a staged photograph. Okay? I think this is what it looked like. When I started, I showed 2. We had a budget to order 2 films from the University of Pennsylvania. One of them was called Methodology, The Psychologist and the Experiment. It's not bad, and you can see it on YouTube. It's out there, and it's worth it. It really, you've seen it, Dana. It's got good content. It really does, but it didn't age very well. The other one I could show was called Freud, The Hidden Nature of Man. And this one, you can find clips of it. You can't find the whole thing, and that's a shame, because this is really a film. I couldn't remember the name of it, so I went online, and within 2 minutes, Hillary Rosenthal had told me what the name of it was. And then other people started to comment. A lot of us have seen this movie. One of the best lines was, "David, what are you doing in the basement with your sister?" So that gives you some indication. This was pretty out there in the 70s and 80s that you're showing these films with this Freudian sexuality built into it. But hey, yeah, that's what you had it. Now, if you didn't have movies, you could show film strips. So you had the film strip projector, and of course, if you're going to show the film strip, you had to have the record player. This record player, I think it was the only one ever sold for public schools. And you'd put the needle in the groove, okay, and then you would sit there by the machine, and they would embed beeps, okay, in the narration, and you were supposed to advance the slide on the beep. And I must have used this technology for 10 years, and I never once ended the slideshow on the last beep. Never once. Okay? You couldn't do it. It was absolutely impossible, absolutely impossible. This monstrosity was called an opaque projector. If you wanted to project something out of a book, you had to sign up for this a month in advance and then wheel it from the library into your classroom. It was a piece of work. This was the Spirit duplicator, a little bit cheaper than a mimeograph, which is why we had them in the public schools, and it would use an alcohol-based transfer agent to make about 120 copies. Then you had to cut a new stencil for it, and they had an odor to them that some of you will remember, which may have something to do with a generation lost, I'm not sure. We had the classroom overhead. That came along pretty early in my career, just after it came along in bowling alleys. And I think one sign of educational priorities, okay, is that bowling alleys got this technology widely before school classrooms did. I bought this typewriter, this model Smith Corona, to replace the manual typewriter I'd gotten from my parents for my high school graduation gift, because I couldn't make the manual cut the Spirit Masters because I wasn't consistent enough with my typing. So I went off and bought an electric typewriter. That was the 70s. By the 90s, I had this baby. Man, and was that nice and sleek. Okay, that's it. But that was much later. That wasn't 70s. In the 70s, we had a grade book. Okay, we didn't have Schoology or Canvas. Those things hadn't been there. We had films and film strips. There was no YouTube. There was the U.S. mail in a landline. I taught in a department of 12 at that point, and we had one phone, okay, for 12 teachers. That was all that was available. If you had to call for a doctor's appointment or something, there was no privacy. If you had to call a parent, there was no privacy. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have email. We had paper and typewriters. We didn't have keyboards and touchscreens. We had chalkboards, not projection systems. We had nothing to compare to Google, Kahoot, Twitter, and whatever drunken people make up these names that they call these things. I can't keep up with them. I try. I've got time to keep up with them, and I can't. And it worked. Okay? And in some ways, it may have been better. Can you imagine your life without having to spend an hour on email every day? What you could use that hour for? Okay? I mean, there's some good, some bad, but it did work, not as well as it does now. I think this technology is good, and I think one of our jobs, one of Strand 8's jobs here, is to make sure that we know how to use it, so that it becomes a tool that we use and we don't become a slave to it, using it just because it's there. And there's a lot of pressure to do that because our administrations have us do it over and over and over again. But it's changed, it's different. The future! Okay? So these are the people we're interested in, and you can tell that she is excited for the future. She's also determined for the future. Okay? She wants to hit it. If you're wondering who that is, that's Marin Alice Blair Broker. She is 2 months old today. If projections hold true, she will graduate from Cedar Falls High School in 2035, and her psychology teacher will be Melissa Rogers. So we need to do this right. A lot of you have people that you want to stake this future as well, and we do need to map the way. I think that's right. I think one of the ways we think of it is we're the GPS system. And we need to get from point A. That's where we are now. We need to envision where point B is and plug in the coordinates and start there. And wouldn't it be great if GPS was always this clear? If it always worked this well? Mine always looks something like this, and I don't know what the hell it means. You know. And we're going to have a lot of that. And you read horror stories. I read some of these. I figured we wouldn't have time for it. Of people driving off piers and through dead ends because they were following their GPS instead of looking at the road. So we need to be thoughtful about this. We really do need to be thoughtful. And I want to end on gratitude, like Randy began, and we didn't plan this, but I think it's important. But there is so much here, and a lot of this is just personal. I'm grateful for what's been done before. I think of a lineage, a line of psychology teachers stretching back almost 200 years. Almost all of them trying to do what's right for their students. Almost all of them with their eye on the ball, okay? And not getting the help they needed too frequently. I'm especially grateful for the things I've had the opportunity to do. I don't get it. There's never been a luckier high school psychology teacher on the face of the planet. The things that just came my way, the people I've had a chance to meet. I can't tell you how much it means to me to be able to attend these, to be able to come here this week, to be a part of this. I'm just so appreciative and so dumbfounded by the fact that this has happened. How do you get to be that lucky? It just it doesn't make sense. For being here this week, it's going to be so neat to see what happens, okay, and not know on this night what it's going to be. And I'm grateful for what the future holds. I don't know if you can have gratitude about something that hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to give it a shot because I have faith in us, and I think it's going to work out well, and we are going to have a huge impact. So we're here. The time is here. The time for science. Damn it. Okay. We're a science, and we're gonna show that this week. The time for hard laughter and harder work. Both of them are going to happen. I hope a little less clapping as the week goes on. My hands are tired, so a little bit less. The time for creativity, collaboration, and compromise. We're going to need all three, and if I were clever, I would have put that together into something, but I had trouble with that. The time for mission and passion. So I said, okay, here's my opportunity. Mashin! Okay? We're here for mashin, and as much as I like the mission statement, I modified it. We're going to create the best future for high school psychology, and we're going to do it passionately this week. Okay, we're going to put everything into this and see what comes out. And given the travel day that some of us have had, the time is here for a good night's sleep. And on the mattresses, if you haven't had a chance to try them yet, that's a challenge, but we'll work hard at that too. So that's what I have. I don't know if people have comments or questions. I'd be happy to hear some of your thoughts about these issues, but thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it. No, don't do that. I don't know what to do when people do that. What happens now? Q&A. Are there microphones for that? All right.
Are there any questions for Charlie?
I can't answer
Or
questions
comments?
very well. Comments would be better.
Charlie, this is, of course, for you and anybody else in the room who might know this, but as you were chronicling what was going on with high school psychology, I know there was a gap where there was a group that was sunset, which meant there was a need for TOPS. Did you come across anything on that, and is there anybody else in the room that might know?
So the 40s gap?
No. Sometime in the 70s or late 80s or early 80s, maybe this is something to research.
For probably economic reasons, we sunsetted the Committee for Undergraduate Education, and we then followed through with high school. And we realized that was a mistake, and we went back to that. But it was really odd that the two largest components of educational psychology were just sunsetted, and other things became more important, including healthcare and internships and postgraduate stuff.
I think that's true. I think we're used to having APA advocate for us, and that's important. But we also have to advocate for us within APA, because the members of APA, the largest group being clinicians, they forget about us if we don't constantly remind us, because they aren't aware of the role that we can play in, first of all, educating people about the services that clinical psychologists and other psychologists provide, and to educate the public as a whole, which is part of APA's mission, to make the world a better place. So we have to remember to keep that pressure on, which is why TOPS is so important, and why it's important for us to join, to not let our memberships lapse, because to have larger numbers of members means that the TOPS committee has more influence among the other boards and panels that they interact with.
I was mentioning earlier to a couple of you that this group represents what I call the silent majority. And in terms of point of contact, you produce a lot more points of contact than the typical clinician. And you should realize that you represent well over 40% of APA. But you, and this is my personal opinion, not APA or the board of directors, I happen to think you're way too silent. Way too silent. Division 2 is way too silent. Compared to, for example, the independent practitioners who are extremely, very vocal.
Yeah.
So I think it's in your best interest, and I said to somebody, and Jamie will probably say, I can't believe you said this, Tony. I think you ought to ask a lot after this conference, and you ought to ask often. And at least for the next 6 months, you have, some support.
Yeah.
But you're, in my personal opinion, you're doing too much work, and you're not asking for enough.
No, we can ask for more. That's not a problem. Eric, last night at the steering committee's dinner, they hosted us for dinner at their house. One of the things that he said was that he saw our role is to disrupt from the bottom. And I like that. That we're going to create disruption from the bottom. And I think for APA, it's money well spent. I remember one time in my tenure on TOPS that the public relations group had put together $1 million ad campaign. They were going to buy short radio spots. And I began to think if they'd invested that $1 million into TOPS instead, so instead of having 15 or 20 seconds with a radio audience, they had a semester. Okay, a semester to get impact from that money. What greater dividends would have come from that? But they get set in their ways. And Tony, I agree with you, and I'm glad somebody in your position holds that opinion, because we can do that.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
It's been a long day.
I know. Let's give Charlie another round of applause, please.
All right. Just a couple of announcements before we go. Breakfast starts at 8 in here. Breakfast is at 8 in here. If you are a non-breakfast person, make sure you are here by 8:29. We have some important speakers at 8:30 and announcements that will move us forward as we are getting the day started. Please, tomorrow we're going to have table tents on the tables to sit with your strand. So all of the strands sitting together for breakfast tomorrow. Some other important announcements. Morning yoga is in the KIER, K-I-E-R, room at 6:30. That's on the third floor of our building. Yes. Is right here. So that's tomorrow at 6:30. Charlie, is pickleball still on? Okay, so we need to do recon still on the pickleball. So with that, let me thank each and every one of you for being here today and for your attention tonight, and Charlie for your talk. We're excited. I think all of us can feel that. It's palpable. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Thanks again.